class. It is October 5th, and this is our groups class. We are doing chapter 5 on verbal and nonverbal communication. So usually what I say when we get this just in the chapter is I will say, if the mouth and the body don't match, you always believe the body. That term is incongruent. So if I'm saying, I am fine, and I got the look on my face, believe my body, not my face. And if you forget, remember Shakira said, hips don't lie. So remember that. Your body can't lie, but your mouth can. So we are getting started on the different models of communication. I'm Dr. Pam Turner, and thanks for joining my groups class today. So then, let's look at this. So again, we've got a couple of chapters we're going to go over. Most people think what they understand what communication is about, but they're not fully aware of the process that goes on whenever people share ideas. We'll briefly discuss that process. Okay. So then, process above is a two-way communication in which a sender directs a message to a receiver. Most communication is two-way, however, right? But in this one, it's one-way. Let's go back and define. The process is called encoding. The first thing you do is translate your thoughts and feelings into symbols, usually words, or sometimes nonverbal, and then so others can understand. That process is called encoding. Okay, the next step then is the number of ways sending a message by letter, email, etc. When your message reaches the receiver decodes the message by interpreting it. Okay, so encoding is how I'm sending the message, the receiver gets it, and they decode the message. So as we see, sender, okay, I encode it, I send the message, receiver then decodes it to understand. And then a two-way communication, which is most often what we do, we're talking to somebody else. I do occasionally talk to myself, but so my sender, okay, encodes it, the message, the receiver, it's decoded. Then the receiver becomes a sender, same thing, right? He encodes the message, and then it goes back to the other person, and you receive it and decode it. Okay, so that's just two-way conversation. Our models identify which misinterpretations can come. First, the sender may have a difficult putting in the symbolic form. They write, they say, they whatever, they're trying to translate it to get you to understand. The receiver may not understand or decode it correctly. Okay, so that happens many times in life. What I meant to say is not what you heard, okay? Or definitely not what you remember. So again, one-way communication, we're looking at those. So when we're looking at a group, especially a task group, where I am the leader, and it's one where it's, let's say it's a task group where we have a very short time to get things done, then I would be one-way communication, right? I'm just telling you what to do. In this situation where it's a teacher situation, it's one-way communication. So you may respond back to me through text or through the chat box. However, at this point, I am just sharing the information. So it's your job to decode it, and then you decide how you receive it and what it means to you. Okay? Some studies examine what happens when information is passed through several people using one-way communication. As the messages passed along, it becomes more simplified and more distorted because of the three psychological processes: leveling, sharpening, and assimilation. This is describing the game telephone, right? You say something to the next person, the next person, to the next person. By the time it gets to the end, it's totally not what you said. And this is the psychological reasoning for it. So as the messages pass along, it becomes more and more distorted. First, receiver reduces or levels the amount of information because they recall less information that it's received. Especially if it's a long sentence or a lot of information, I'm going to level it or reduce it to a way that I understand it and I can perceive it. The second, a few high points, becomes dominant and readily remembered, or sharpened where they're sharpened where the remainder is forgotten. Okay, so again, I'm going to, as I receive that information, the third person, the third level, I'm going to, my message will become more dominant and readily remembered and sharpened. Okay, whereas the rest of the reminder is forgotten. So when it goes to the next person, then that gives a more dominant speech, and they're going to then sharpen it. Third, the receiver interprets or assimilates much of the message in terms of their own personality and reference frames. Okay, so by the time we get to the third person, it has been levelized, it has been sharpened, right? And then it has to be assimilated. So assimilation is the way that I understand it. Of course, the variation of one-way communication involves feedback. So there's directive and coercive communication. Directive is me telling you what to do. Coercive is when I'm telling you what to do, but there's kind of my thumb is on your head. So I'm telling you to go clean your room, but I am putting some power into that. With the approach, the chairman delivers a message and the group has an opportunity to seek clarification. The feedback is limited to determining how well the members understand the message. When the chair determines that the member understands the communication, okay, then the communication ceases. Types of communication is based on the premise that the chair's view on the issue is the best interest for the group. So again, when I am the teacher, I am in charge. How I view it is the correct way. Okay, communication breakdowns. For example, in one Wisconsin county, 2 deaf parents whose children were placed in foster care almost lost their children permanently due to communication breakdown. In one period, there were 4 out of 8 courtroom hearings in which interpreters were not in attendance. When interpreters were present, the judge failed to ask them their qualifications to ensure that the parents could understand. The parents were also sent letters informing them through the case manager via voice, telephone, or email. However, neither parent was given a computer or device. This could not allow them to contact the case manager. When appropriate interpreters were located, it was found that both the parents read are below the 2nd grade level. Once all aspects of communication were addressed, the parents were more successful in their ability to get their children back. And another thing that a student reminded me that ASL is sign language is not necessarily English as we've been taught in school. So there are symbols, there are characters. So that doesn't mean that because I am ASL, if I'm deaf, it doesn't mean that when you're interpreting what I read, those two things don't often match up. Of course, we want the two-way communication, right? Where I say something and you say something. But I think all of us have been in situations where communication has failed. So you have said to your spouse something that you didn't mean to be taken as hurtful feedback, but the spouse hears that hurtful feedback. And especially in text, right? And we're doing things online. You can't read my intonation, right? You can read the capital letters, and that means that the person is angry, or that they're old and they don't realize that the capital letters mean that you're angry. Or you may give a short answer, and the receiver takes that as curt. One of the studies that was done was the difference between how males and females communicate. And females, of course, and this is not everybody, but just over research, that females share much more in general. We talk much more, we share much more. So I may say in a text, I say, how I'm feeling, blah, blah, blah. I say all of these things, and the man answers back, okay, I'm fine. And you're like, what? What? He didn't answer my questions, he doesn't love me? It's just that men need fewer words. Okay, so learning how men and women differ definitely helps how we converse with each other. And what you get back from that two-way conversation is not what you expected, but not to take it hurtful, because that is just sometimes how people answer. Okay, perception, of course. The perception is when I decode it. That's what I was in my phenomenological view. That's what I understand. So the message received by the receiver depends not only on the encoding process of the sender, but also the receiver's decoding or interpretation. For example, the receiver may add to the sender's message. If a student of the opposite sex tells you, "You look nice today," you might receive that the sender is really saying, "I'd like to be romantically involved with you," which may not be what the person said. Okay, so finally, a receiver may distort proportions of the message, for example, because it cannot be heard clearly or understood clearly. So when I get the message, when I get the message and then I understand the message must be fully accurate, fully accurate or partially accurate, or completely inaccurate, right? And an ink blot test demonstrates there are huge variations of what people perceive as ill-defined or nebulous communication. The patterns of the sender's message is based on the receiver's experience. Okay, so let me just kind of show you what that means. They were referring to the ink blot. Pull that up. So what the author was talking about is he was talking about Freudian terms, and Freud believed that our information was unconscious and we projected it onto the pictures. So if we look at like an ink blot, that's one of his theories. So again, Freud would say, "What do you see?" And when you describe what you see, that is from your perception. Okay, so what I see may not be what you see. Some people see a butterfly, some people see a bat. I always see a woman who's like dissected in half. So if she were dissected in half at her hips, that's what I think it looks like. So just my thoughts. But of course, I look at these most often every day. But whatever you see, that is how you communicate. And that's what he said. This is the way of you sharing your unconscious. The other one, of course, he used was the thematic apperception test. And you're looking at your perception. It's called the TAT, or the thematic apperception test. And these are black and white photos. And again, their faces are kind of obscure, so you can put in the picture what you think is in the picture. And this was Freud's way of you communicating your inside stuff to him. Unconscious, that was a Freud thing, right? So my TAT, you were given 20 sets of pictures, and they were given to both men and women, while 2 sets are administered to boys and girls. The recommendations, the tests be administered in two 1-hour sessions containing 10 each. So that's the way, okay? And the instructions say, this is a test of imagination, one form of intelligence. Let your imagination have its way as in a fairy story, and tell what people in the pictures are doing. So again, we all have different views, right? So in this one, you know, she's looking like, "Oh, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." And he's like, "Oh, I'm out of here," right? Or of course, we can see it a very different way. She could be saying, "Oh, I'm so glad he's leaving. I'm so happy." And he's like, "Oh," he could be oblivious to what she's saying, and he's leaving. And deep down inside, she's like, "Yay!" We don't know, right? And of course, this one, we can read lots into that. So could the old woman in the shadow be her thinking process? Could it be a grandmother? Could it be a witch? Could it be a side of her personality that she keeps hidden? All of those things. Again, everybody has a different response. So as this message is sent to you via the pictures, you're supposed to send that communication the way that you've assimilated and your perception of what's happening in the picture. So because receivers are exposed to so much input that they can possibly handle, perceptions are attached to an individual experiences. The first step of this process is just like data considered enough information to interpret. Okay? For example, stimuli that are intense, large, loud, or bright, they always stand out. Okay? Repetitious stimuli also attract attention and widely used by the receiver. So example, on commercials, and this was as the Smokey Bear, right? Or if you watch your TV show, if you have a TV show, you know the intro to the music means something's going to happen. So as you perceive that, so one of the things that I do when I'm teaching students for the test is I suggest repetition. We all learn differently, and the best way is repetition, repetition, repetition. Whether I'm a visual processor or an auditory processor, so I look at it over and over, or I hear it over and over, because those things make a bigger impact on what we remember. Okay, and also our motives often determine the information selected from the environment. An interesting thing that babies, they learn, the first words that they learn are of moving objects. So dada, mama, things that are moving. Ball, dog, toy, so things that are always moving. So that catches their eye, that helps them, that perceptual process for them helps them retain the language. As they get older, of course, they have more words, but in the beginning, they really are learning those words that are active. Those get their attention, and they're likely to remember those. Okay, so we organize the data in some meaningful way. Okay, so things that can influence how we see the data, of course, are our five senses, So taste, they're familiar, fairly wide variations in the way people experience taste. Although there are four basic types, sweet, sour, salty, and bitter, individual taste buds permit considerable variation. Okay, so it talks about how people determine what their senses are. So arguments and discussions concerning the palatability, the taste, often centers of which food tastes better. But the simple fact is that food tastes different to different people. So I absolutely adore macaroni and cheese. I love old-fashioned macaroni and cheese where I slow bake it and it's crispy on the top and it's juicy and cheesy and gooey. And when I pick up it and it's almost like the cheese and the macaroni have formed to one. Oh my God, that's so good. My kids can't stand it. They're like, oh no, Mom, we like the Kraft in the box better. When they were little, at least. But yeah, so that's my preference, my taste. And I certainly, when I think of that taste, it brings back special memories. It brings back Christmas and holidays, and times we were having family dinner together. So that taste is paired with some of my fondest memories. Smell, of course. Okay, so pleasant odors. You recognize that smell. Again, it's perception to others. So, well, I think my perfume smells good. Someone else may think, oh my gosh, Pam stinks. Right? But neither are right. That's just your interpretation of it. Temperature, of course, we all know the temperature of my perception. When I am freezing, I cannot process. I cannot think. I'm so cold, right? And room temperature to me is different than room temperature to other people. I'm thinking 82 is the perfect temperature all year long. Yeah. My kid would die, right? When she was little, before she could actually, share with me. She'd be sweating. And I'm like, oh, what's wrong? So now that she's older, she definitely knows how to go back and then change the thermostat. But definitely, the temperature that's how we process things. Hearing, of course, and vision. So one of the things that when we ask about momentous things that were momentous in your life, from history that maybe you you easily recall, we think about 9/11. And 9/11, we think about, if you were there, you think about the explosions. If you were nearby, you think about the smell. If we were on TV, watching TV, we think about how we felt. So things that have that much of an impact on our emotional system or our senses are things we're definitely going to be least likely to forget because they're tied to one of our five senses. Okay, we talk about Freud, and Freud, of course, is my unconscious guy, but he also came up with defense mechanisms. He gets most of the credit, but however, several of them were made up by his daughter, Anna. So defense mechanisms are a psychological attempt to avoid or escape from painful conditions such as anxiety, frustration, and hurt. Individuals' defense mechanisms are usually activated when I face information that conflicts with my self-image. Defense mechanisms preserve self-concept and self-esteem and softens the blow of failure, deprivation, or guilt. I will tell you my favorite one, the one that I use all the time, and again, Freud said they were normal. He didn't say they were pathological, they weren't crazy, they were normal. I use intellectualization. So when I hear bad news, my first thing is to go to WebMD and Google it, right? Go process. Instead of feeling the pain, I go back and I just intellectualize. I go into this mode where I'm going to think about ways to fix it and then cry about it later. Okay, so that's one of my favorite defense mechanisms, right? Rationalization, that talks about why we do it. We make sense in our head. A man says he beat his wife because she didn't make dinner. So he's rationalizing in his head, okay? But again, he said that Freud said they protect us from our own self, our own anxiety. Projection. By using these defense mechanisms, group members can consciously attribute their acceptable ideas and impulses to others. For example, would a person who wanted to make himself look good by making others look bad, right? Psychologically, this person does not want to admit that they have such selfish motives. So he projects the selfishness onto others by believing they are trying to make him look bad. Okay, so projection is projecting my feelings, the way that I feel, onto you. Okay, so a husband is cheating and he accuses his wife of cheating. So it's something about myself that I don't like, right? And then I'm projecting it onto you. So if I think everybody's out to, there's no altruism, people are always out to get you, if that's what I think, then I'm projecting on other people. So when people try to be nice to me, I'm always thinking they're just out to get me. Okay, and these skills are used in group as well as in individual sessions. Denial, of course. Denial is most often used in drug and alcohol use. Okay, and I said that denial is not a river, the Nile. It's a real thing. People really think that they are in the denial stage. Okay, so when they're in denial stage, it didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about. It didn't happen. I had a client one time standing in front of me who had just gotten out of prison for vehicular manslaughter. And he said to me, I could have stopped drinking anytime I wanted. My process is I would have stopped drinking before I killed somebody, but hey, that's just me. But denial, people really don't, they don't really understand that it's causing a problem. Reaction formation is when I'm forming a reaction totally opposite of how I really feel. So let's say that, I have lost my job and we're worried about money and I go out and plan a huge cruise for my family. So I'm forming a reaction totally opposite than how I really feel. The book describes it as group members can avoid facing unpleasant truths by acting opposite to the way they really feel. Individuals who are angry and cannot admit it to others or themselves often act as if they've done nothing wrong. By using the reaction formation defense mechanism, sad and lonely people can act as if they're live for the party and laughing and telling jokes, right? So if I'm truly sad and unhappy, that reaction formation would be I'd be the life of the party. That's opposite of how I really feel. Also people at funerals who grieve deeply may behave as if everything was fine, right? The defense mechanism, denial, is generally involved in reaction formation as individuals seek to deny painful facts, events, or feelings. So I like that what he said. So when someone is dying or someone has died, it is so easy for me to forget the bad things, right? So on the inside, I still might be very upset, very almost angry at the person, but I'm forming a different reaction, right? Because it wouldn't be okay to be angry at a dead person. So I'm going to form a reaction differently than how I actually feel. Compensation, I always think compensation is when you're missing something, so you make up for something. I call them Disney dads, and I'm sorry if I'm offending any dads, but divorced parents, and mom has the kids most of the time. Dad comes and gets them on weekends, and he does something really fun with them. So he is compensating for the time he didn't get to spend with his kids. Okay, so the mechanism involves offsetting or a real defect in the inferior by creating a real or fantasized achievement of superiority. For example, a divorced father may attempt to soften the child's pain by buying them expensive toys. Exactly. Just as unhappily married college students can avoid failure by dealing with putting all their energies into studies, right? So I'm compensating for an area that I'm not good at, so many times I'm overcompensating. So what I'll see sometimes on a test question would be like, a woman who is out of overweight and out of shape can't keep up with her friends while shopping. She feels really bad, so she buys all of her friends expensive gifts. Okay, she is compensating for her feeling of inferiority that she can't keep up with her friends. Identification, okay? So identification in adulthood is I identify sometimes as my job, sometimes as somebody else. That way I can say that, if I identify with Beyonce never had any problems, right? So when you were 7 or 8, you had heroes or heroines who you realized and imitated. Some adults hide their feelings in certain situations instead of being themselves. They imitate someone they admire. Okay? So then, people who really are, I dress like Beyonce, I have twins, and I name them after Beyonce's kids, and I really live my life through Beyonce because I think her life is better than mine. So also, if you see someone who identifies by their job, right? If you answer the phone and they say, "Hi, this is Pam Turner of whatever company," then that sometimes you're not using yourself, you're hiding behind the identification of your company. Fantasy, of course, fantasy involves a way to dull the pain, right? Something is happening, you can daydream, you're in a boring class, you're getting something done, and you're just like taking yourself someplace else. Right? So fantasy can help you then, again, identify with the pain, okay? Protect yourself from the pain. Regression is going backwards. In a child, it's pretty easy to see. You'll see that a mom has a new baby, and the 6-year-old then begins to wet the bed again, right? Or they are no longer fully potty trained. And regression is going back to a childlike state. Okay, so in that stage, they shed tears in an attempt to be excused for not fulfilling crucial commitments. You might even see, as an adult, the regression. So you see a man in a boardroom or in a courtroom, he's having an important meeting, and he's sharing his opinion, and the other person doesn't like his opinion, doesn't like what he says, so he gets up and he slams a chair and he storms out the courtroom, like a little kid, right? Instead of staying and talking like an adult, he acts like a little kid. Displacement, of course, is where I do that a lot. I have 3 children, and I get angry at one of them, and the closest one to me gets it. My younger one now knows to say, "Mom, you're displacing your feelings onto me." Yeah, okay, you're right. But she's my baby, and she's aware that when something happened at work, and sometimes some things that happen with her sister and brother, I will take it out on her for the smallest infraction. Okay, and that is displacement. Undoing is wishing I could undo something. I can't. I said some really mean words, so undoing would be buying you flowers, right? So I'm trying to undo the process. So everyone uses defense mechanisms, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There's a really good story on how the defense mechanisms are used. Okay. This is, what was that there? Okay, so a Jhari window. Get lost it. Self-disclosure. There it is. Okay, So self-disclosure can be defined as a process of deliberately revealing information about ourselves that is significant that would not be normally known by others. That's self-disclosure. With a friend, self-disclosure is fine. You can disclose as much as you want. In the clinical setting, we disclose minimally. That means there's no reason to tell our client about ourselves. Okay? They may ask for information, but we're supposed to be this kind of figure that they can interact with. So telling them my children, my stuff, all those things stops the process. Okay? The risk of self-disclosure can be described as, by Jhari, is when you permit yourself to be known, you expose yourself not only to a lover's bomb, but also to a hater's bomb. Okay, a lover's bomb, the sweetness, or a hater's bomb, which can blow up in your face. Whether he knows you, he knows where just to plant them for maximum effect, right? So then, failure to disclose appropriately for many reasons. Some people fear closeness, rejection, criticism, or they may be ashamed of their thoughts. Okay? So what we talk about is, this is called the Jhari window. Okay? So the Jhari window is a graphic measure of self-disclosure in groups. So we don't do any other names for the test, but you remember Jhari is for Joe and Harry. Okay, they're the ones that came up with the diagram, so Jhari. So then they look at your desires, things that are hidden, things that are closed, or things that are open. So it looks like we have four corners. Okay, so when you see it in a question or see it on a test question, it's going to look like left rear, right rear, left front, right front. Okay. So in my left rear, that's my Facebook page, right? Everything that I know about myself and I'm willing to share with you. That's open, right? I just like, oh, my family's so happy. We never argue. We always get our bills paid in time. Life is great. Yeah, right, okay. So those are the things that I'm willing to let people know about myself. Now, the two, the left, right, that is considered my blind side. Those are things that people may know about me, but I don't know about me. Okay, so I think of driving, and my blind side are things that I can't see. So sometimes people will talk to me about my when I'm using a mic. Sometimes my voice is way in the mic, and it feels like you hear my breathing. So I'm not aware of that. I don't hear you on the other hand. So sometimes someone's like, Pam, go back from your mic. I'm like, oh, thank you. So I can't see that, or I can't hear that. So it's my blind spot. So if someone tells me, it's great. The third is the hidden. Now those are things that I know about me. Those are things I am not placing on Facebook. Those are my secrets, right? I'm not telling anybody about that. I'll be embarrassed. I'll be ashamed. Oh, they'll look at me differently. No, I'm keeping that to myself. And 4 is my unknown area. So that's the right front. And the unknown area are things that I don't know about myself and things other people don't know about me either because I don't know. The goal is to be more open. Okay, so let's look at it. So some areas have been referred to as the public self, and some are the quadrant 2 is your blind area, which represents part of yourself that you're unaware of. Quadrant 3 is the bad area in the hidden area. So this one goes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So quadrant 4 is your unknown area, which represents the part of you which neither you or others are aware of. The Jhari window can be individualized by moving the boundaries into the position that describes a single personality. Okay? So if I'm looking at me, I can move this. So I could say that my open quadrant is bigger and my blind is maybe smaller, depending on my personality. But if I'm in a group session, the goal is to go from me knowing about myself, me growing, and then me deciding whether I want it to be open or hidden. Example, so 2 years ago when COVID hit, I thought all my kids were home. I thought, let's try a garden. Let's just try a garden and see what happens. I've never tried gardening before. not since I was like, 5 with my dad. So planted this garden and we produced fruit. Can I tell you how surprised my friends were? Me, the person who, has never had a plant, me, the person who, my first rose bush was planted by a friend, and that was like 5 years ago. And he said, oh my goodness, I can't believe a woman doesn't have a rose bush. I just wasn't that person, right? But the more I got to know about plants, and I read the Farmer's Almanac, right, me, I've turned into this like farmer Pam. Oh yeah. So my unknown has become bigger because I have learned that I do love plants. I do love tending to my fruits and vegetables in the garden. I really like that. So of course I could have moved it to 3, the hidden things that you don't know, or I could have moved it to 1. So of course I moved it to 1. So I went on Facebook and I paste all of my beautiful pictures of my plants and my flowers and my vegetables, like all perfect. Did I put a picture on Facebook of the ones that I killed? Nope. That's gonna be my hidden. You don't need to know that, right? I only want to share with you the good things. But in the group, the thing is I want to share more of myself with the group because it helps me heal. So again, feeling good after self-disclosure. We're going to do that exercise, but it really talks about stuff I've been carrying on my chest for so long, things that I think people would hold against me, things that I think, would change the way you look at me. That's heavy. That's really heavy. When I'm able to tell somebody, it's great. And when I'm able to be in a group that other people have the same issue, I learned that my secrets aren't the same. I mean, my secrets are held by other people. They're the same. That's called universality. And that's one of the reasons people go to a group, because I really want to feel like I'm not the only one in this boat. Okay? This talks about I messages. So I messages are when I describe your behavior, the way it makes me feel. Instead of blaming you, saying, you did this, you did that, I'm going to use an I message. So I messages say, I'm upset when you come home late for dinner. Okay? Instead of saying, you're late for dinner, I'm using the feeling, I feel upset or I worry when you're home late for dinner. So those are I messages. So you're not actually, you're so late for dinner all the time, I'm tired of this stuff. We get angry and the person gets defensive, right? Oh my gosh, I was working late, what's up with you? So that starts a whole argument when you're really maybe just worried. Okay, so we're going to use the feelings before we talk about the behavior. The receiver, on the other hand, also needs to, instead of jumping to the wrong conclusions, he should clarify, right? Clarification is something that we use in group or individual session. I want to make sure that I understood what the person is saying. So, are you saying this? Or tell me again what you said? Or what does that mean? Right? I want to make sure that we're understanding the same thing. My 17-year-old, well, she's, she's, Mom, I'm going out to, making the dough. Like, okay, is she at the bread store? Is she at the grocery store? Oh, she's working, right? She's working. So after she translates that to me, then I know what it means. But I don't always understand. So if your client is of a different ethnic background, even in America, so there are some words northern people in the northern parts of the United States would use as opposed to people in the southern part. In this area, this is the Coke area. So Coke was produced in Atlanta, and we're about an hour and a half away. And the Coca-Cola bottling is in Chattanooga. So everything here is Coke. Many more Coke products, many more Coke lovers than other places. When we went to Minnesota, and they asked my daughter if she wanted a soda. And she's like, what's that, Mom? Right? So making sure I understand what that means. Okay? Again, my listening skills, it's very important to listen, to learn to listen. Most of us are formulating the next thought and not really hearing the person. The average rate of spoken speech is about 125 words per minute. We can understand an average of 300 to 500 words per minute. Therefore, a considerable amount of dead time in spoken parts. That's when the listener's mind can become easily distracted. The listener starts talking to himself, or time to take up the slack time. Listening to the internal monologue may go on side by side with listening to the external dialogue. Moreover, however, it goes on to the expense of listening to the external dialogue. Okay, so if I think that I'm telling you something, and I think that I'm telling you something important, and I'm only using 125 words per minute in the language, the verbiage I'm giving you, and you hear a lot faster than that, then in the blanks, then you may have already formed an opinion of what I'm going to say. You may have not heard what I said because your thoughts are someplace else. But the external person is going to be the person that has the problem, that has the most concern, because they're going to lose out on my full attention, right? How many of you have husbands or wives that you're talking to and they're watching TV or they're on the computer, they're doing something, right? So I used to say to my husband, at least make face contact with me. Pretend you're listening, make me feel better. Just look in my eyes, okay? Because as the person is talking, they're definitely trying to focus on two conversations, but the conversation inside their head about the game is going to be the one that wins. Okay. I talked about iMessages, right? So iMessages follow the simple format. Okay, the sender tells the receiver, when blank, you identify their irritating behavior. I feel this way. When you come home late, I feel worried. I feel sad. Again, those iMessages are letting you know how your behavior makes me feel. So it's not blaming you. It's not shouting at you. It's telling you how that behavior makes me feel. Okay. When you act stupid, I feel hurt. Okay. It's important to reflect this in a non-blaming and non-judgmental attitude. Okay. So we're not yelling out at you, when you do this, I'm upset. That's not happening. We're trying to use learn appropriate communication skills, especially with your spouse, with your life, and whether you're doing a group or an individual session. Okay. Non-verbal patient communication, of course, I talked about that earlier. Your body reactions such as sweating, stammering, blushing, and frowning often reveal the presence of emotions, right? Fear, embarrassment, or discomfort that people would rather hide from others. So I may say, I'm fine, and you see the tears coming down my eyes, right? Because my body can't can't hide that I'm sad. So verbal cues often reveal what I'm really trying to hide, right? So in literature, perhaps the greatest reader of non-verbal cues was Sherlock Holmes. In this exchange, Holmes deduces the following about his friend Watson. How do I know that you've been getting yourself very wet lately, and that you have had a most clumsy, careless servant girl? It's simply implicit itself, so he says. My eyes tell me the inside of your shoes, just where the firelight strikes it. The leather scored by almost 6 parallel cuts. Obviously, that means someone has been carefully scraping around the edge of the floor. Okay. My double deduction is that you have been in vile weather, and that you have had particularly malignant boot sliding specimen of the London slavery. Wow. Okay. So he talks about nonverbal and verbal cues, but he's using also deduction and deduction. So let's look at those terms. There we go. Okay, this is the one I like. I'm not trying to broadcast or advertise for this company. I just want to show you. Okay, if you can see this one on the small part of my screen, I mean, you see my arrow, but deduction versus induction. So deduction is when, let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay, so deduction is when I always say that we get arrested either way, deduction or induction. So sometimes on Law and Order, there will be a dead body with the husband is dead and the bloody knife the husband has in his hand, right? So it seems obvious that he's the killer. So my theory is he's the killer, so I'm going to go ahead and arrest him. And then I'm going to hypothesize, right, why I arrested him, getting more conversation, more observation. I'm interviewing witnesses, I'm talking to people, and then I'm trying to confirm my theory that he was the killer. Okay, so induction is the other way. So deduction starts from theory and goes down to confirmation. Induction goes back up. So observation is I see the dead body. And you think of like Columbo or the game of Clue, right? A dead body was found in the library. So then I have to look for clues, patterns of who did it, and then I hypothesize who I think did it, and then that's how I build my theory. It was the butler. He killed her in the library, right? Or we finally proved that it was the husband who did kill the wife. But we're starting from the observation up in inductive thinking, and deduction thinking goes from my theory down. Those are important terms that you'll probably see later in life, and if you're not taking a test now, you will see it in the future, I promise you. I don't actually guarantee that, but that's one of the common terms that we see. Okay, so that's summarizing the chapter. Understanding the modes of communication, identifying the factors that interfere with the communication process, to learn to communicate more effectively, and have an increased understanding of nonverbal commitment. I hope you got that, guys. Remember, go back and read the book for my students. You'll understand more about it when you go back and read the book. I do appreciate you hanging out with me during class time. This is 10-5, and this was for my groups class. Dr. Pam Turner, thank you guys for being in my class today.